Hello. Welcome to the EU Pavilion in Sharm-el-Sheikh. And my name is Martin Hessian. I'm introducing the session and coordinating it to an extent. And there are a couple of administrative things I need to tell you, or exciting administrative things, I hope. One is that we're using Slido today, which some of you may be familiar with, but essentially you will be entitled to answer questions, and we will see those questions being answered up here on the board. There is a QR code, as I understand it, that will be displayed to you, so that you can download the app if you don't already have it and contribute to the debate. The other little organizational thing that I should say to you is that there are ongoing negotiations on this issue of Article 6, and I'm really grateful for those that are here already, but we have one member who is speaking for the Africa group at the moment in another room across the conference center, and I'm hoping dearly that he manages to get here, and we'll be grateful when he does. I'm also grateful to Kuki for being here already. So just to do a very brief introduction before handing over to others. This project is intended to assist developing countries particularly in deciding what they want to do with respect to Article 6. Article 6 is the framework that allows one to participate in markets internationally. There's an accounting framework and a mechanism attached to it. But the crucial issue that's different from the Kyoto Protocol is that everybody has accounting obligations attached to this mechanism. And that means while there are benefits to the investment that is coming into the country using it, there are also potential liabilities in terms of the accounting. And as a result of that, many countries have hesitated around their participation, and that hesitation has been around an understanding of what the financial benefits versus costs might be, and they want to understand how Article 6 will assist them in implementing mitigation policy domestically. Against the background of the large emissions or ambition gap that we have, it's a big question whether Article 6 will deliver greater ambition, and the view of the European Union and many others is that it will only deliver greater ambition if it's integrated into the ambition plans of host countries, and for that to happen they need to understand its implications economically and socially, etc. So this project is intended to give them that background and framework. It's a South-South cooperation because, as you'll hear, it's based on an integrated assessment system that has been developed in Costa Rica, and the intention would be to build that system and to deploy it in other countries to see how it would work there and hopefully assist them in deciding whether to participate in Article 6 and how. And with that brief introduction, you'll learn a lot more and you'll hear about it a lot better from those that will be involved in implementing it. I'm from the European Commission. We're happy to fund it. We have UNEP who are going to be running the program, and I'll let them explain. So I will hand over, first of all, to Nicholas Hagelberg from UNEP, and he will introduce himself better than me because I'm not so well prepared as I should be. And please, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Martin. So my name is Nicholas Hagelberg. I'm the Senior Program Coordinator for UNEP's Climate Change Program, and it's indeed a pleasure to be here with you today and say a few remarks on the launch of this European Commission-funded project on Article 6. So this project is a response to the multiple demands there has been from countries on building support and helping building the understanding and capacity for implementing Article 6. And today, the launch of this pilot project will help countries use Article 6 as a measure for voluntarily cooperating on the NDC implementation. And the building of knowledge and understanding will look at both government parties, private sector, NGOs, and also the wider public. In our 2021 emission gap report, we assessed what carbon markets can deliver in terms of the emission reductions. And the key findings are that 4 to 5 gigaton could be delivered through Article 6 and carbon mechanism, but there are also higher estimates, even up to 8 to 12 gigaton. And in our emission gap report from last year, we also find that the cost could be reduced by 40 to 60% even of the NDC implementation. And we see quite a lot of potential, as 120 countries have already expressed that they are keen on using Article 6 in delivering NDCs. So with those few words, Martin, I would like to hand back to you and perhaps hand back to the next speaker. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you so much for coming and for that introduction, and much better than mine. I'd like to turn over to Karen Olsen, who will be running the project, and she will explain it in a little bit more detail exactly what it is that we're planning to do.
Thank you. And I have some slides. I think they're shown here. That today it is the launch of the carbon market capacity building support, and I will introduce what this is about. The title of the project is Integrated Assessment for Article 6. As Martin just explained, there's a lot to assess before countries can decide if they want to transact. What do they sell? What do they keep for own NTC compliance? And in the next slide, you can see the agenda. Oh, sorry, I press. This. So I will explain the objectives and describe what the project is about, particularly what support is available to countries to help them implement Article 6, how is the project set up in terms of the partners, and then the time plan. Objectives of the project are the main one being for developing country governments to have the tools, data, and technical capacity to use Article 6 cooperative approaches strategically for their own NDC implementation, enabling ambition raising. And with that, we mean that NDC implementation is aligned with the long-term goal of the Paris Agreement. Other goals are to enable countries to have capacity and tools, and we will develop this through a South-South learning by doing approach, very much building on the experience of Costa Rica, and we have on this screen also, at least I can see our speaker from Costa Rica, who will go into the details on this. So the last objective is that domestic mitigation strategies are enabled by stakeholder engagement in 3 countries that we have not yet decided who are, or we want to have expressions of interest. And that with these pilot countries and this pilot project, we can catalyze broader deployment of the approach regionally and globally. Oops, this is small, but
It's big up here.
is it bigger? Okay, good. So you can. So fantastic. So the impact we want to achieve with these 3 work packages is that developing, well, actually is the main objective. We want developing countries to have the tools, the data, and the capacity to use Article 6 cooperative approaches strategically for NDC implementation. Yeah, I just said that. So work package 1 is a toolbox to be co-developed with partner countries. The work package 2 is the in-country support to 3 countries, and the last one is knowledge sharing for deployment of the approach. And in more detail, the toolbox is about developing or adapting existing methodologies and tools, not necessarily doing new tools, because a lot exists from a lot of Article 6 initiatives. but doing basic things like cost-benefit assessment of options, what are both the conceptual and operational strategies and tools, what policy and guidance on sectoral decarbonization pathways are needed, and then a decision support framework for how to use the tools and select which ones are most needed. There will be 2 phases. A phase 1, which we call pre-selection, to identify countries interested and able to participate in this pilot implementation of the toolbox. And the phase 2 is in-depth support to 3 countries, presenting the toolbox as a menu of options that countries can choose how many and which ones, depending on the country's specific needs and capacities. And last, we will share the tools publicly through an online platform. We want to socialize the lessons learned in such events, but also regional events. And we want to conduct at the end a needs assessment for deployment of the approach more broadly, once we have learned how it works. And the setup in terms of how partners are organized, as you heard from Martin, funding comes from the Commission. There will be an agreement with UNEP. And as the project management setup is that UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, which is where I come from, we will be the implementing agency. UNOPS, which is also based in Copenhagen, the United Nations Office for Project Services, is the administrative entity doing things like procurement. So at the bottom, you see that we will have subcontracted partners and experts among national stakeholders within the 3 countries, working with government as the main partner. This timeline, I know it's small, so not to get lost in details. You can see it's a 2-year project, and we have the activities, toolbox, in-country implementation, and knowledge sharing. So we will start with the phase 1, identifying who to work with, and in parallel, we will start up the toolbox development so that we can be ready with the first deliverables quick, and start with the in-country implementation in phase 2. And as we do that and learn how the tools are applied, we will at the end revise the tools and disseminate them more broadly, and that's the last work package on knowledge sharing, which is going to happen throughout the implementation. And here I stop. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Karen. And so you've got an overview of the project and the deliverables. And I want now, without further ado, so there's time for questions, etc., to turn over to Professor Quiros Tortas in Costa Rica, which is where this innovative approach to integrated assessment has been developed. I'm hoping he appears. Good morning, and thank you so much for coming to us. I think it's still the morning there. I have not met you, but we've discussed this project, myself and Felipe, for a long, long time, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to explain how this works. So I will turn over to you, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to confirm that you can listen to me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Good afternoon over there. It is not that early in Costa Rica. It is about 9:47, so it's okay. And yet, I am a wake up early morning person. I love to wake up very early, so it wouldn't be a big deal to me. I want to thank Felipe and the organizing committee for inviting me to present this integrated and I call it ecosystem of modeling tools that we've been developing in Costa Rica to support policy making in the country. As I will go into the details in the next couple of slides. We have been developing this set of tools that speak to each other in a smooth way. Frequently, we get questions from policymakers on how to use it and how to respond to some specific policy questions that they constantly have. So this ecosystem, it really grows in time, is quite dynamic. So it's also something very important to keep in mind. A tool is not something that is static. In fact, it grows. Many years ago, we were not talking about hydrogen as we are talking about it today. So it has grown in time. So to capture all specific, all particularities of hydrogen, just to give an example. So it's also something very important. I am Jairo Quiroz. I am professor at the University of Costa Rica. I hold a PhD from University of Manchester, United Kingdom. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And as we will see in the next slide, I just want to start with some full key aspects of carbon markets, and something that we have to keep in mind is that in any of these implementations, by all means, the carbon markets must facilitate implementation of the NDC and long-term strategy, if the country has one, because there are only 53 countries in worldwide with submitted LTS today. And these are some references that can go into the details of how this facilitate process can be done. Also, something very important as well is to carbon markets must avoid by all means any carbon locking. So when we are designing any implementation, we have to keep in mind that we have to do transformational changes and not transitions. So we have to really assess how we can go from A to B, but without passing by something in the middle that is not going to be cost effective in the long run. So this is what we will call it carbon locking many times. And I will not go into the details of carbon locking because it's not the space to speak about it. Also, we have to avoid overselling. By all means, we have, for instance, in Costa Rica, we have committed to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And we really have to understand how we are going to get to net zero. What are the mitigation actions? And if we are going to compromise in this carbon market, any additional reduction, or we will enter into the market, we cannot commit something that will help us to reach net zero. It has to be something that we haven't yet committed, but we can based on this carbon market. So this is also something very important we have been discussing in the country. And to the extent that it is possible, the carbon market must help accelerating the decarbonization of the country. Because, for instance, if you're going to receive supplementary financial support to accelerate the decarbonization of the transport fleet, for instance, it's going to be a big success for the country. So how this can be done? Okay, so in the next slide, I'm going to tell you how the country has been doing this for a long time. And but before starting with that, once to or a way, but maybe we go to the little box that we had in the previous slide, and apologies for that. Before we enter into how this has been done in Costa Rica, something very crucial that we have emphasized many times in the region, because we've been working in the region, is how we actually build local capacity, how we actually put capacities in universities, think tanks, how that local capacity can help the design of the long-term strategy, how it can really help understanding the possible carbon lock-ins, capture the scope of existing mitigation measures, and support an informative process based on science. So this is really the process we've been following in Costa Rica, and now in the next slide, we will see how this all started in Costa Rica. So in 2015, now in the next slide. Yes, thank you. In 2015, we started with this modeling ecosystem. So it's really something that takes time. Okay, we can ignore 2 years of COVID, but in general, we've been working on this for over 7 years now. So in 2015, we received a support to build a times model. Times back in those days was commercial, and there was this consultancy firm supported by the World Bank. He came to Costa Rica and started building the first long-term optimization-based model. This model was really being developed by the international consulting firm while transferring some capacity to the University of Costa Rica team that I lead. So we were the technical counterpart. We were processing data. We were supporting on the types of analysis that were needed in the country. And we really provided support and then adopted, because this is when the local capacity starts taking relevance. This consultancy firm finished the job. They did a great job, by the way, but they left the country. So who remained in the country? Well, the University of Costa Rica. So we adopted the model and we started improving it with the knowledge that we gained. We maintain it and we put new data because, as I mentioned, it's something dynamic. About 2-3 weeks ago, we got the new World Energy Outlook, and we needed to update the whole ecosystem model with new information based on the latest data that was available worldwide. So this is very important to have this local capacity being trained to do the updating process and to continuously support the government. So this was in 2015, and after that, we continued to collaborate with the government of Costa Rica to start the first discussions towards the national decarbonization plan. But in parallel, as we will see in the next slide, in 2018, we started a regional project called Deep Decarbonization Project in Latin America and the Caribbean. This was launched by the Inter-American Development Bank, and it involved 6 countries in Costa Rica, in the region, sorry. Peru, Argentina, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Mexico, and I am missing one of my friends, and Colombia. Yes. The objective was really to build and continuously grow this capacity in government and in local universities, particularly, or think tanks, depending on each country. We actually, in Costa Rica, produce a flexible, open source, and free tool that can develop millions of decarbonization pathways. This was done based on Osmosis, which is an open source energy modeling system. And we were trained during this project by KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. They were our trainers, and we were gathering extra support, extra knowledge from them. The project was led by IDRI, a think tank in France, and it was really to support the director of climate change. We reused the data from previous model, and we built this flexible tool that is currently being used as a modeling tool for supporting policy decision in Costa Rica. So, for instance, the National Development Plan, the National Decarbonization Plan, the National Energy Plan are currently using this flexible tool. In the next slide, I just want to emphasize how the process is actually done. We were really being trained, we got supported, we created a team, we participated in international workshops along with the colleagues from KTH, and it was really a stakeholder engagement plan as well. As we will see in the next slide, this tool was then used to in multiple workshops. Really, there were, if I don't mistake, if my brain still works fine, we held about 18 workshops with different stakeholders. We were bringing information from the model. We were actually discussing the lacks of data that we had. They were providing extra data. So we were bringing that data into the model. We were providing extra knowledge, extra results, and they were really looking at the results while discussing how to improve the model and what type of results they wanted to see from the model. And this was all done during the first workshops towards the design of the National Decarbonization Plan that was led by the Director of Climate Change in Costa Rica. We produced around those days about 18 different pathways, decarbonization pathways that were discussed with different stakeholders, aiming to reach a consensus, aiming to reach an agreement of how to reach net zero in a way that it's politically implementable, that we will have this political will to do it. All those initial efforts were focused on the energy sector, which is responsible for 67% of the greenhouse gas emissions of Costa Rica. So as we will see in the next slide, in 2019, in 2020, we received an extra support from the World Bank to continue the development of this ecosystem. We continue to work with colleagues from KTH, and we built a CLUES model. The CLUES model is something that integrates climate, land, the existing energy model, and water. So these models is integrated. It exchanges information between different sectors, and it allows an integrated assessment based on open data, because it's also open and free software. The model was built along stakeholders. In this case, we held 3 sectoral workshops and over 10 bilateral meetings with relevant stakeholders, such as the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Planning, the Minister of Energy, the Central Bank of Costa Rica, and others relevant stakeholders in the country. Just to conclude, and as we will see in the next slide, we've been working lately on bringing this ecosystem of models to the private sector. We've been working with different multilateral organizations on how we bring all this information to those that will actually implement it. Because we have this national decarbonization pathway, but the implementation has to be lower to those that will actually do the job, the private sector primarily. So we are building this Excel-based tool that really lowers all the national targets and helps the private sector developing decarbonization pathways for their enterprise, for their company. This is an ongoing work that we've been doing, and it's something we've been calling the sectoral decarbonization catalog that I just forgot to translate here in the above the figure that you see there. So apologies for that. We piloted in 7 enterprises at the beginning of this year. It was a huge success. We received lots of feedback, lots of good comments, ways to improve it as well, obviously. And it's something that we are all working at the moment. And last but not least, all this ecosystem of tools to develop national decarbonization plans or long-term strategies, we've been bringing this information to other countries in the region. At the moment, we are working with Ecuador on doing this ecosystem and inform the national decarbonization plan that they want to develop. We are actually starting a project with Guatemala, and we are also working in Dominican Republic to support the decarbonization of the electricity sector. So there are ongoing efforts also in the region that have been adopting this ecosystem, which has been quite flexible, quite successful, and and really thanks to many efforts that we have been doing with and support and financial support from different colleagues from World Bank, IDB, GIZ, UN, and so on. So thank you very much for the space to speak a little bit about it, and I get back to the main session.
Thank you so much, Professor. And I hope you are as excited about this as me. I know that you must be, because for me the potential around this is that it enables understanding of those pathways, but also it brings together different policy officials, but also different stakeholders to input to that. And in that sense, it has well, it helps with decision making, bringing together those around that might not otherwise be brought together. And with the focus on carbon markets that we have, it should enable countries to respond to requests to participate or plans to participate in a much better way. And there's a long wealth of experience and a long period of development in this, which I think will serve us well as we look to deploy it in other countries. Now, I want to turn to Kuki from Indonesia, who has been kind enough to delegate some of her many responsibilities in the negotiations to come here and respond. And I'll allow you to introduce yourself, because I'm really bad at that, but I appreciate you coming, I really do. And I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin, for having me here. And yeah, as you mentioned, let me introduce myself. My name is Kuki Suyahmun. I'm with the Indonesian delegation, but on daily basis, I'm in fact with a think tank, an Indonesian think tank. The name of the think tank is Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization. And yeah, it's a small one, but we are trying to contribute to the process anyway. And it's quite interesting to see both what Karen shows on the project, overall of the project, but also to hear what already happening in Costa Rica and the region. And I think, Martin, because this is, related to Article 6 capacity building, then I would see that the one that mentioned earlier, what happened in Costa Rica is, for me, is kind of, if I can say, like the basis in a way, so that we can understand how we can achieve, or we can maybe reduce our emission. And on the other hand, and of course, we need some capacity to develop such pathway. In Indonesia, we did have a number of modeling as well, but it has not been integrated in a way. There are a number of institutions that working on how to, reach a certain level of emission in different sectors. But I think, being new in the whole, everyone is new to the whole setting of this Paris Agreement, right? And for developing countries like us, like Indonesia, then this is really new. We don't have much experience in doing all the accounting. We don't have much experience in doing all the reporting. So for us, definitely having understanding the pathway is one thing. But I think if we are talking about being able to be part of the Article 6, then there are quite a number of elements that we, I think it's not only for Indonesia, but also for most of the developing countries, if not all. There are a number of things, and I'll try to put it down here. I hope I can, somehow include most of the things. Accounting I already mentioned, and with that, then we are talking about the whole story of corresponding adjustment, which is still difficult to understand in a way. But also, if we are talking about corresponding adjustment, then there is the certain element of authorization, and this is something new for us, for the government, for the authority that will be, given that role. And then, the methodology will be different. There are quite a number of reporting that is also different because we've never been doing all this adjustment in our accounting and reporting before, because under the Kyoto we are not it's not mandatory for us, right? But also, I think a number of other things that is also important, and I think this will be also, applied for other developing countries, is on the governance and also the regulatory framework. So how you set a certain regulatory that can support your involvement in this Article 6. Yeah, so I think I'll just stop there. But, there are quite a lot of things that us as a developing country need to build the capacity for. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kuki. It's a real pity that Mbai isn't here. I'm sure that he will. He may turn up too late. But this project, just to explain to you, has been informed by conversations that we've had in the negotiation room around what Paris means for markets and what it means for developing countries in responding. And I know that we've had many in the margins discussions after arguing over the rules about how are particularly developing countries going to respond to this new framework. What's different, and the four elements of the top of the professor's slides, is that these markets need to be Paris aligned. So the ambition needs to be reflected in them, and there are these accounting obligations. And I think it is challenging to respond to it. And I've heard all these challenges in my conversations, and certainly with Mbai yourself and others. The question is, how do you respond to that? And quite a lot of capacity building is in and around helping countries set up processes to do Article 6. I think what's distinctive about this is it's about the readiness. It's about whether you want to do it, on what conditions, in what sectors. It's to really enable an integrated approach to deciding where you want an intervention, where you might not, what the options are. That's my explanation, and I'm sure Mbai would have said exactly what I said there had he been here. But we have a little extra time, I think, though I'm not the best timekeeper in the world as a result of Mbai not being here. So maybe we can have a slightly longer period of interaction and Q&A. I don't know if we're ready for that. And thankfully, I am not technically responsible for any of it because it would be a disaster. To introduce, I'm going to invite all participants here in the studio, and also those of you that are online, whatever time of day. And I apologize, it's very early morning in Costa Rica, to participate in this Q&A that we're going to do through the Slido system. Have people had the? Oh, they have. You have this QR code, so I'd invite you to get involved. I can see everybody rushing for their phones, and you. I can also tell you the questions directly. Apparently, we can speak. Doesn't have to be electronically. So shall we start? Yes. Okay. So these are. Yeah.
Thank you so much, our panelists, for this brilliant idea in terms of capacity building under Article 6. I'm Chimwemwe from Malawi, and I'm more interested in the capacity building support that is going to be provided through this initiative. Just like Indonesia has alluded, we're also facing the same challenges in terms of understanding the whole aspects around Article 6, especially 6.4, where most of the things are new, and would appreciate support, as we are having lots of developers coming in, trying to understand this, and also how they can assess carbon credits within our country. And I was just wondering if you could share, in terms of the criteria that you're going to use to get those 3 countries to pilot this, because we are interested in this, and we just wanted to know what criteria is there, so that we can also know how what steps we can take to be part of this initiative. Thank you so much.
I guess the first is your card, but I'll turn over to Karen to explain exactly how that works.
Yes, that's a good question. And so far, the project is at early stages, and we discussed among the partners what should the criteria be, thinking that since it is a readiness project, that there's no sort of expectation from the Commission or not from us either, that there will necessarily be trade. It's a readiness project. We think that the main criteria is that there is interest and ability to engage. And then we will, in the pre-phase, we said in the work package on the in-country implementation, that we will develop the criteria and then talk to countries interested in our, I can't remember if it was 3 months or 4 months, but we will spend months to answer that question.
Thanks so much, Karen. I'm seeing some questions online that are actually policy questions, as far as I can see. And I don't know whether, Kuki, do you feel like answering any of them? Some of them are being discussed in our negotiations and are therefore sensitive issues. I could give you very easy answers. Will carbon markets differentiate avoidance from removal? I would say almost certainly. That's at the moment, avoidance is not in the carbon market, though there are proposals on that. Will removal offsets incorporate duration and permanence of CO2 removal? Kuki, it's your turn. She's not going to answer. I say yes.
Yeah.
Another question from the studio. And those of you online, it would be great if you'd ask us about the project, please. Yeah.
Is there any component or task or working package in the project which is analyzing the challenge or risks of this carbon market for the international trade, especially against the carbon markets in the developed countries, I mean mature carbon markets?
And it seems, Karen, or Kuki, it's for you, or indeed, Nicholas. Karen.
So let me just check I got the question right. The challenges for developed countries with this trade?
Is it okay? Yeah. After launching this carbon market in developing countries, for example, Costa Rica, the challenge and risks during the operating of this carbon market, especially for the international trade, because international this carbon market will not be domestic. So international trade will be affected from this carbon market. So most probably there will be some challenge because, for example, European Union has already launched a carbon market, and we can call it a major carbon market. So there will be some challenge, most probably. It is already analyzed within this project or not? This is my question.
There are many challenges, and from a developing country perspective, the one that was also mentioned from Costa Rica is the one of overselling risks. To have the assessment in place, what does a country need for their own compliance, and what can they sell at what price? So I think that's why the focus here is on readiness. Before you trade, before you can make a decision whether to trade or not, and in which sectors, what types of mitigation actions, what other benefits do you get? I mean, the unit is tons of GHG emission reductions, but there are also many other aspects of what projects can bring, such as sustainable development, which in the past was what the DNAs had to approve. Now they have to approve a lot more. But there's also the technology transfer aspects and a lot of capacity built because of the partnerships with private sector from abroad and domestically. and I was at first when you asked the question, I thought if you referred to other carbon pricing instruments or issues such as CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism the EU has put in place. But Martin, I won't say anything about this. I don't know if you want to say something.
Would be very happy, but I don't think it's the subject of what we're doing here. And if you want to talk about it, by all means. But I'd rather have responses to the project, which we are not sponsoring the carbon market or trying to tell countries what to do. We're trying to enable countries to make decisions for themselves about what the domestic capacities are, what they need to have, what domestic mitigation they might need to do, and how then to engage with a lot of stakeholders who are coming in to ask them to participate in the market. But can I say, I have to say thank you so much, because I know exactly the stresses that you are working under. I would like to interrupt the Q&A just to turn over to Mbaye Diagne from Senegal, who is the lead negotiator on all these issues for the Africa Group. But not only that, he has got extensive experience in Senegal, from which he comes, in terms of managing carbon markets, both under the Kyoto Protocol, but now moving into Article 6. So I would ask him to respond to the presentations, were it possible. But I have to, maybe you could explain to people what the problem is in terms of engaging in Article 6 for you, and what it is that a project like this might help you with.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for this invitation. And sorry for not being on time, because we had some negotiations on CDM, and I was there. Just to recall that with the Paris Agreement and the Article 6, we are in a complete different situation. As you know, under the KP, as well as under the Paris Agreement, the main actors will be private sectors, local governments, NGOs, developing projects and wanted to have more revenue from those projects, and that will go in the market to sell the units. But now, when that happened under the KP, there were no implication for the host country, because the host country has no engagement, just providing a letter of approval to ensure that the project meets its sustainable development goals. That's the only main concern for the developing country perspective. But now when it comes to the Paris Agreement, when those kind of transactions happen, the country will apply what we call the corresponding adjustment, meaning that the transaction made by private actors within the country will have an implication in the ability of the country to meet its own commitment under the Paris Agreement. So it's why we have decided under the Article 6 that any transaction under Article 6.2 will be subject to an authorization by the host country, because that transaction will have a very large implication in the ability of the country to meet its commitment. It's why before providing that authorization, the country needs to assess the implication of those transactions in its NDC. Not only in terms of sustainable development issue, not in terms of being in line with the policies within the government, but also in terms of impact in the ability to meet its mitigation commitments. That is one point. And to do so, the country needs to have a very robust infrastructure to assess those projects in relation to all those aspects: sustainable development, the policies, development policies, as well as the Paris Agreement's engagements. In another end, there are many other complexity brought by the Article 6.4 that wanted the project not just having an offsetting, being an offsetting instrument, but going beyond the offsetting. It's why the issue of the baseline, the issue of the additionality, all of them will be very important, and the host country will be involved in defining that in relation to its NDC as well as its long-term development strategy. And that will happen under the 6.4 to get a registered project and issue emission reduction. That will happen under the 6.2 when the transaction happen. But I think in the future also, even in the voluntary carbon market, that will have an impact. It's why to be able to effectively participate in the carbon market from a developing country perspective, a benefit from the opportunities offered in terms of enhancing the ambition, increasing the ambition, as well as benefiting for the adaptation, the country needs to have a very robust infrastructure in terms of institutional infrastructure, in terms of regularity instruments, as well as human resource. And that will not happen just spontaneously. We need to work on that because we have seen that in many developing countries, including African countries, you have only one person being in charge under the CDM, being the DNA, in an office or at the Ministry of Environment, and sharing its time with some other work. Now we'll need to have all the lining ministers to be involved, the private sector in some commissions to do that work and build a very strong and robust system within the country. And for that, we have embedded in the decision in Glasgow a capacity building program to be conducted by the Secretariat, but and provided some money for the Secretariat through the regional centers. But we have also, in the same decision, called for having many other institutions and partners to join the Secretariat in supporting, because we know that the Secretariat only will not be able to do all the work that is needed. That are my reaction in relation to that. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. And from my perspective, I'm hopeful that this project will catalyse the sort of in-country cooperation that's needed to respond to this, and that it will assist governments, particularly in responding to the private sector, given the rules are new. And but I wanted to turn over to Professor Quiros Tortos, or I don't know whether I can call you Jairo. I'm probably saying it wrong anyway. But you had a question, I understand, for somebody.
Rather than a question, it's just a reaction to. By the way, you can definitely call me Jairo, because that's okay. I used to live about 7 years in the UK, so. Yeah, just a reaction to the latest question we got from the audience, and they were discussing about the risk. Just wanted to emphasize that this ecosystem of models, it must be able to capture uncertainty. When you are planning 30 years ahead, or even more, in some cases, you can't do it without thinking of uncertainties. So when you are planning on with uncertainties, you can use different methodologies. In particular, we are using in the region, definitely in Costa Rica, a robust decision-making methodology, which was designed by RAND Corporation, a think tank in the USA. And this methodology basically allows us to explore what if cost of technologies double from now to 2050 and so on, or what if they just halve whatever the projection today estimates. So, and after you do all those thousands of simulations, you can really explore what are the risks of your strategy, your long-term strategy, and plan ahead how to overcome those risks. Because the most important thing of planning under uncertainty is to anticipate risk and plan ahead and make decisions before you get to that point or of not turning back a point, right? So this is also part of the ecosystem that needs to be thought when you are developing these tools, and it's also a comment to Karen that is going to be developed this exciting project. So to also think how to include this robust part into the future ecosystem for these three pilot projects. And that was my reaction to the latest question we got from the audience.
Thank you so much. There's a reason why I'll never be a TV personality, many, but one of them is management of time. We've got 2 minutes left. I think we can maybe afford one more question and a quick response. Does anyone have a burning question? If not, I might ask whether anybody wants to do a summary, or is there something on their minds that we've...
I just want to add, because I saw that in the question, the system many developing countries are trying to set up and build in relation to Article 6 will be an integrated one. We will not have a system addressing the 6.4, another one, the 6.2, the transaction, and the voluntary market. Because at the end of the day, we will report on our NDC what we have realized. And in that reporting are included all ITMOs and all mitigation activities. So to be coherent and comprehensive, we will need to have an infrastructure and institutional framework that encompass both the voluntary carbon market as well as the compliance market with 6.2 and 6.4. Bearing in mind that if the units are sold for the usage for another country's NDC or other international purposes, that will be corresponding adjustment. If it was not the case, that will not be a corresponding adjustment. But it will be comprehensive to have a unique system addressing all of that at a country level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you, in, I say, 20 seconds, Cookie?
Yes, and I think that's the biggest challenge, because then for us, we need to have like the system in the country that register all the things that happening, and that's also need another capacity as well.
Yes, and if you don't mind me adding, in my history, I was also responsible for dealing with some pilot projects in the UK. Here, I want to tell you that I'm actually Irish, not British, but whatever. And we had all the same difficulties, but thank you. I don't know whether we're over yet. I just want to thank everyone from coming, particularly our very busy negotiators here. I'm grateful to you for being online and for coming here. I hope it was at least informative. And I'm sure we'll be doing another event like this where we will be showing you some results and reactions to the implementation. So thank you very much.